Movies. They've been around for at least 100 years, but nobody's quite sure where they come from or who makes them. Relics from the Roman Empire, messages from beyond the stars, who can say? Whatever the case may be, one thing is clear. Movies exist. As you can see, I have a lot of movies here, and I've seen most of them. You know what would be fun, a fun little video to do? If I just sat down in front of my DVD Blu-ray collection and just went through and talked about some of my favorites. But I thought it would be more interesting instead to talk about some movies that I haven't seen, that I do own. Why does one blind buy a movie? Why would somebody blind buy a bunch of movies? These are the questions that I will be assailing today in this YouTube video. Hello, my name is Sarah Zedig. My pronouns are she, her. Let's talk about the movies that I haven't seen. So as you can see, I have a lot of criterions here because, yeah, and that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about. These 6 up here are actually my recent acquisitions from this past sale. I had $70 in credit saved up, so my broke ass was able to afford a few extra than I was planning to get. And I've actually seen a lot of these. Of these 6, I have not seen The Last Waltz. I have seen The Heroic Trio in college. I have not seen Executioners. I hadn't seen Targets when I bought it, but I have since watched it with my girlfriend, and it's amazing. And I haven't seen Gimme Shelter. So this feels like a pretty good place to start. Part of the thing for me that's perhaps a little bit different than some other people who own Blu-rays and stuff is that as a result of doing this channel, I get to claim these as tax write-offs. So of the films that I haven't seen, of the 6, Gimme Shelter and The Last Waltz, two of the best concert films by reputation ever made, 1970, 1978. The reason why I got these without having seen them or knowing very much about them is that, number one, I like Martin Scorsese and I like the band. I'm not a huge Rolling Stones person, personally, but they're both concert films that have interesting things going on in them. Certainly interesting enough that they are on the Criterion collection, I suppose. And the reason, more specifically, is that I got them as a comparison point for Stop Making Sense, which someday I will do a video on. I have a pretty interesting read on that, I think. I think it will be an entertaining video. And they just feel like appropriate comparison points. So that's a pretty obvious, why would you blind buy these movies, right? And then there's these 2 other ones, Targets and Medium Cool. I have seen Medium Cool. I saw this in college, 1968. 69 is when it was released. Then Targets, 1968. I got them because I've been meaning to get this for ages, but I got them because they're both filmed in the late 60s in the aftermath of the assassination of Martin Luther King and JFK, Robert Kennedy, and I just feel like the 1968 Democratic National Convention and just the general air and mood and vibes of 68 are a little bit relevant to the vibes of 2024. So I've been wanting to sort of revisit films of that era and just get a sense of how artists at the time were processing them. Targets is amazing, by the way. My copy arrived damaged, but they're sending me a new case and a new cover, which is really nice. Criterion has great customer service, by the way. So those are 2 easy examples of some movies that I blind bought that have a pretty obvious explanation, whether that's as direct research material for a video or as indirect research material for something that may turn into a video or might become something else. Who knows? I like to bring things up in my videos sort of randomly. I like to make different kinds of connections and things. The first DVD that I ever encountered was Aaron Brockovich at my cousin's house in Lewisville, Texas. I remember watching Aaron Brockovich on my cousin's PC it must have been 2000, and thinking, wow, that Julia Roberts sure can't act. And then the first DVD that I owned, that we got when we got a DVD player, was Shrek, and it was all downhill from there. There's an experience that I had in the 90s and the 2000s that was ubiquitous but is now completely non-existent, which is the video rental store. So you go to a Blockbuster or Family Video or whatever, and you pick out some movies, watch them over the weekend, bring them back next week, and trade them in for some other stuff, or get some N64 cartridges. I did that a lot. That's how I played Clay Fighter 64 a bunch. That game probably sucks, but claymation video game, that's pretty cool. I like to rewatch movies, especially when I was in high school. I rewatched a lot of movies. I kind of compulsively, anytime a movie like clicked for me, I just watch it a bunch. So I got into the habit of trying to get copies of things. I think I had like a little bit of an allowance. I figured out that at used bookstores and used video stores, places like Hastings, you can trade in books and games and stuff for store credit and then use them to buy more DVDs and stuff. I always really liked physical media. I've always liked having a reminder, a thing, a little totem that sits on a shelf, and you look at it and you go, oh yeah, I remember that. And it's sort of the same reason why I have a lot of physical books, because digital ephemera vanishes from my mind and consciousness. I really hate reading PDFs, and I like a little plastic case for a movie and putting the disc in a thing and watching the movie. And I like the idea of being able to watch these movies whenever I would like. But whatever, movies that I haven't seen, let's see. I have up here some like director zones, sort of. So this is my Krzysztof Kieślowski zone. And of my Krzysztof Kieślowski films, I have not seen Blind Chance, and I have not seen all of Decalogue, which is a shame because Decalogue is beautiful, what I have seen. I just haven't sat down and watched it. Like, I have a lot of other movies by directors because I like the work of that director. Like, this here is Abbas Kiarostami. This is Terrence Malick. And then here is Olivier Assayas. And then these are just some other ones. This is because I have room. It's a little stuffed in here. That's why I had my new acquisitions up here, because I haven't found a place for them. I have to sort of reorganize my shelf. So all of those are kind of obvious. I really like these directors. They're some of my favorite directors. So I have their stuff. And so there's things that I have seen, things that I haven't seen that I want to watch. Like, I haven't watched Badlands. I haven't watched Days of Heaven, weirdly enough. I haven't watched the last film in the Coker trilogy by Abbas Kiarostami. I haven't watched Close Up. And then here, these are some other things. God, Station 11. That's a good show. Somebody should make a video about that one of these days. I have a collection of Maya Deren films. She made Meshes of the Afternoon, which is a brilliant film that I have seen. And so I got this collection because I wanted to have a copy of Meshes of the Afternoon and also just explore her filmography because... wow, what an incredible filmmaker. And then I have here 2 Don Hertzfeldt Blu-rays. I did a Kickstarter for to various points. And I actually somehow, this is one of my great shames. I love Don Hertzfeldt. I have not watched It's Such a Beautiful Day or any of World of Tomorrow. I have them right here, and I haven't watched them, and I know they're going to be brilliant. It just seems like they're existentially a lot. Here's the thing with the blind buy, with the I have it and I'll watch it eventually, is, well, I don't know if I'm really in the mood for that right now. And that's the real killer. The thing about movies is that you're always in the mood for every kind of movie, no matter what your heart tells you. All you got to do is turn it on, and then 5 minutes in, you forget that you weren't in the mood for something because mood is fake. And that includes, not Barbarian Sound Studio. That's a real-ish movie. No, a Serbian film. Thank you. My girlfriend read my mind and knew exactly what garbage I was reaching for. That's extremely funny. Yes, a Serbian film. No, that's not true. You're totally allowed to not be in the mood to watch a Serbian film. But my Olivier Assayas, I have not watched Summer Hours. I haven't watched Carlos. I've watched most of Police Story, but I haven't watched all of Police Story or Police Story 2. I've watched some of the works of Marlon Riggs. You haven't watched Tongues Untied by Marlon Riggs? Excellent film. Proto video essay.
Whatever awaits me, this much I know. I was blind to my brother's beauty, and now I see my own. Deaf to the voice that believed we were worth wanting, loving each other. Now I hear. I was mute, tongue-tied, burdened by shadows and silence. Now I speak, and my burden is lightened, lifted, free.
This is a great box set. I've watched like half of the movies on here. Awesome. One of my favorite blind purchases. I'd never heard of Marlon Riggs before. Here's the thing with Criterion, right, is that they release new titles every month, and they announce them a few months in advance. And so with these releases, they do this sort of balance. Well, they'll release like a Wes Anderson film, and that's the one that's definitely gonna sell. And then they'll release like Black Girl by Ousmane Sembène, brilliant film about Senegal's relationship to colonial France. I actually did a video about this film ages ago, like before I came out as trans. But that's not a barn burner. That's not going to be selling 1 million copies and, paying Criterion's bills for the next 7 months. So they use their big selling titles to subsidize their more sort of, I would say, important restoration and preservation works. What I'll do is when they do an announcement or when something comes out, I'll just go look at what they say about it and watch some trailers and whatever video clips and images they have and just see if it sounds like it's up my alley. There reaches a point when you watch enough movies where you stop having the kind of compulsive, like, well, I don't know if that's for me. I don't know if I'm going to get that. I don't know. There's some types, like comedies, I'm like, I'll take them or leave them. It depends on the comedy. It depends on how nihilistic the comedy is. But generally, I have a pretty open mind, and I think when I was younger, when I was in my 20s, I had this very firm sense of like, here's what makes a good film, and then here's what makes a bad film. And now I've seen enough movies from enough countries, from enough decades throughout the history of cinema, that I don't really think there exists an objective directory of what makes a bad film. I think anything can be good if it's good. That's sort of how it's a tautology, but that's just how it is. If a movie is good, it's good. It doesn't matter if it has jump cuts or breaks the 180-degree rule or does any number of other horrible film sins. As long as it's good, then it's good, and the rest of it doesn't matter. If they're using it intentionally, if they're doing something, if it's doing something, if it accomplishes its goal, if there's even just like a scene where you can feel some kind of synthesis of intention and production, then it works, and that's all that really matters. So I don't have the kind of compulsions against like, oh, well, this movie seems like it sucks. Like, I don't like movies that suck on purpose, but generally I just like movies. I just like watching movies, and I'm capable of having fun with just about any movie as long as it's having fun with itself in some form. I'm just going to pull some of these out that I haven't seen yet. So here are the criterions that I own that I have not watched, which it's actually less than I was expecting. I guess I made a concerted effort when my channel was doing really well in like 2019. I got a bunch of movies, and there were a couple of times where I got a bunch of movies after that I hadn't watched, and at a certain point I was like, okay, I actually have to get through my back catalog here before I can justify buying more movies. So I did actually make a concerted effort to get through my backlog here. Night and Fog, Holocaust film, very difficult. I know it by reputation. I intend to watch it someday because I need to inflict the horrors upon myself and witness what humanity is capable of. But it's, this is one of those that's like, I don't know, I'm not in the mood for that today. Jean Dielman by Chantal Ackerman. I love Chantal Ackerman. My great sin is that she is like, her short films from New York in the 70s really, really influenced me, like a lot. Like her sensibilities in terms of how patient she is and how domestic she is and how quiet and boring she is. I made a film that was inspired, sort of a direct homage to her work, that was a 9-minute short film of a woman doing dishes in her kitchen and cleaning up, while occasionally voiceover would read lines from first-hand accounts of actresses who had accused various Hollywood figures of sexual assault and stuff like that. Undergrad film students have a tendency to kind of like, I'm doing Pulp Fiction, I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna do, here's color removed but with only reds are visible, and it's a detective noir movie. Here's violence against women, isn't that saying something about society? I always just found that tasteless and not really doing very much. So I made a short film where it was about trauma that happened in the past, and how most of the time that you spend dealing with trauma is time that is just sort of normal, where you're doing normal things and it's not happening to you anymore. I won't talk about it anymore, but the experience of being told by the men in my class where I screened it was like, oh, it's kind of boring. And then to be told immediately by several of the women in the class, wow, that was really heartbreaking, was like, all right, well, I found my intended audience. My great sin is that for as much as Chantal Akerman has influenced me, I actually have not watched most of her films, like her actual movies. World on a Wire by who's not the guy who plays the robot in Prometheus and Alien Covenant. Similar-ish name. Werner Fassbinder. There we go. Rainier Werner Fassbinder. That's it. Yes. I'm challenging myself to remember these names before I pull the disc out and check. Rainier Werner Fassbinder, prolific director, gay man in West Germany in the 70s, who made like 40 films in 10 or 15 years, and died really young, and like a shocking quantity of those movies are all-time classics. There's 2 videos I think on this channel at some point where I did a presentation in a class about Fox and his friends, and then did a discussion afterwards. World on a Wire is a mini-series that he did that's sort of about the internet ages before the internet existed. 1973 this was. I've heard lots of things about it and that it's very interesting and very timely before its time, but until I watch it, I can't know. Brighter Summer Day by Edward Yang? Is that right? Yeah, I was right. I have watched the first hour of this when I got it, and I thought, wow, this is a good 2.5 hour film, and I'm almost at the end. And then I realized I had only seen an hour, and it was actually a 3 hour film. It might be longer than 3 hours, 236 minutes. It's gorgeous and wonderful, and I want to finish it. And I know a lot of people hold Edward Yang's films in high regard, but I haven't gotten around to it because it's a long movie. That's the other factor with a lot of these, especially on the Criterion Collection. Classic cinema, or just cinema in general, the kinds of movies that would make it onto the Criterion Collection tend to be pretty fucking long. And no matter how much of a film buff you are, it can be a bit of a burden. I do find myself gravitating frequently like, oh, 90 minutes? That's nice. I'll give that a shot. Deepan. This is like a true, genuine blind buy where I didn't know the filmmaker, and I didn't really know the premise. I mean, I read the blurb and watched the trailer and thought it looked interesting. I've since become aware of the fact that there is some seemingly very reasonable criticism of how this film frames immigration in France, and that it might be like a bit reactionary or regressive in some way. But I have not seen the film. I want to judge it for myself. I'm deeply curious, and that's the kind of thing that I find fascinating, is like, apparently this film has that air of trying to comment on some sort of timely racial divides in society and kind of falls flat on its face. But again, I haven't seen the movie. I don't know. I don't know anything about it, so I just take that information from some things that I've read, some posts that I've seen around, and just kind of put it in a little box next to the movie, and then once I eventually sit down and watch it, I'll unpack that box and cross-reference it and see if it holds any water. War and Peace. This is the Soviet adaptation of War and Peace that is 422 minutes long, but it is separated into multiple parts. I've watched the first part with my girlfriend, and it's brilliant, and we just haven't sat it down and watched the rest of it. It's a Russian adaptation of War and Peace. What more could you want? It's cool. It's really big in scale. I wish the Soviets were still allowed to make movies. Europa by Agnieszka Holland. This is another one that I've seen some criticism of from certain corners, but I don't know how to take it. Again, because I have not sat down and watched this movie. But the reason why I got it specifically is because when I was in film school, I had to do a presentation. It was for a class on women filmmakers, and we each got assigned a filmmaker, or I think there was a big list of women filmmakers from all across the world that, and then we all got to like pick one. And I picked Agnieszka Holland because I looked up her filmography and I thought, oh, this is interesting. And I actually did a presentation about her history and about Europa, and talked about it as if I had seen the film. And I got an A+ on that assignment, even though I hadn't watched it. So I acquired the film in this sort of retroactive penance to my past self for having lied about watching this movie in front of a class and a teacher that I dearly respected. Until the End of the World. This is a weird one because I have watched the first half of it. This one's a very long, this is a 287-minute movie, but again, split into 2 parts across 2 discs. I sat down when I was sick one time. I tend to watch movies actually most often when I'm sick. So really, I should be getting sick more often. I need to stop masking all the time and go out and get COVID every couple of months so I can have more time to myself to watch movies. Things Spoken Aloud by the Utterly Sane. It's a road movie by Wim Wenders, who also did Paris, Texas, which I also have. Beautiful, strange, and I haven't watched the second half because it's long, and I want to sit down and give it the respect it deserves. I really like the first half. I'll get to it eventually. I wonder if these count. It's like Celine and Julie go boating here. Also, I've watched like the first hour of this, and this is 193 minutes. This is a French New Wave film, late French New Wave, that is really interesting. The first hour is sort of off-putting in a entertaining way, and I really don't know what to make of it. And that's kind of the story with a lot of French films that I get. Whenever I watch them, I'm like, well, I don't know what to make of this, but it sure was fun. That's being a little bit disingenuous. I like French film when it's good. Takeout. This is a very recent acquisition that I genuinely I don't think I remember a single thing about it. I read the description and thought it sounded interesting, and that's sort of how it goes. Anytime I buy a handful of movies, I'm like, if I get something that I have seen, I need to get at least one thing that I haven't seen, which is something that I probably should have mentioned earlier, but I'm unearthing this as I'm talking about it. This is sort of my compulsion, is that for a long time I would just get the movies that I know I really, really liked. And there's movies that I know that I like, that I know that I can get pretty easily. And frankly, any of these I could, find online pretty easily if I wanted to. But it really comes down to, like, when I sit down and I'm like, well, maybe I'll just watch a movie. And I turn to my shelf. What kind of library do I want to have? Do I just want to have a bunch of American movies from the last, 20 years that I rewatch endlessly? Or do I want to expand my library? I sort of deliberately don't get a lot of I used to get a lot of blockbustery stuff, but I don't so much anymore unless I really like it. I prefer to have weird stuff that I haven't seen on hand. The other thing is that most of my blind buys, I watch them and I'm like, that was a good purchase. That was a great purchase. That's kind of why what eggs me on is that I have found that the principal challenge for anybody getting into movies or watching a movie is just sitting down and forcing yourself to watch it. You can come up with all these different excuses and reasons why you're not in the mood, or why it's not your type of thing, or whatever. And sometimes, you don't want, moods come and moods go. They aren't entirely fake. I used to get questions that are like, how do you watch movies? And the answer is you just watch them. It's harder to talk myself into watching something like this than it is to talk myself into watching something like Jaws or whatever, a classic Spielberg that's a crowd pleaser. You can sit down and watch it whenever you want. I have a harder time talking myself into watching something like this than something like that. And that's exactly the reason why I like to have movies like this on hand, because I find that most of the time when I watch these, I just get so much more out of them than I do the crowd pleasing stuff. And there's movies that I rewatch endlessly, like The Nice Guys. I've watched The Nice Guys approximately 500,000 times, and I will never get tired of it because it's a perfect movie that gets better every time you watch it.
I got a license to carry, motherfucker. Ever since your little visit the other day, this little baby's gonna stay right here.
Generally speaking, I prefer to not let my viewing habits stagnate into one specific thing. If I find myself skewing mostly towards like the American New Wave of the 70s, I'm like, well, I should probably try to, pick out some other movies from other countries at different time periods. I just like to keep my cinematic psychosphere Oh God, I sound like some new age freak. I like to keep my cinematic psychosphere like really cleansed. I like to moisturize my brain with international cinema. What an awful sentence that was. Okay, what about the rest of these? Let's go through the rest of these and see what I haven't watched. Well, shoot, I have actually watched all of these. Boy in the World is one that I got because my girlfriend has seen this movie and she really likes it. And one of these days we're going to sit down and watch it together. And that's another type of movie that you get that you haven't watched is a movie that you want to watch with somebody that you care about, and then you buy it and you put it on your shelf and you go, I'm going to watch this with somebody that I care about someday, and then you never do. We will, though, because we're built different. And then I feel really bad for not having watched this. This is Winston Roundtree's People Watching, which is an internet show that was a thing in the 2010, early 2010s, late 2000s. I can't remember exactly when this was. Sort of late stage flash animation type show. My girlfriend gave me this Blu-ray. Different girlfriend. It was the first time that we met in person. This is one of those. I'm like, I hold this close as a relic of a precious moment in my life. And one of these days, I'm actually gonna watch it, and then tell my girlfriend how much I liked it. Ghost in the Shell. This is the anime, not the ScarJo movie. I have seen this, but I saw it in high school, and I don't really remember it. Maybe I've watched it once when I was in my 20s, and I still don't remember it. There's something about a certain era of Japanese anime that's like big spectacle and really interesting stuff that all just sort of, it's all more about tone than it is like substance. And I could be completely wrong about Ghost in the Shell. Again, this is the thing. Do not trust an opinion you formed when you were in your teens. Do not trust an opinion you formed when you were in your early 20s. Like, do not do that. Don't be like, well, I watched Citizen Kane when I was 14 and I hated it, so Citizen Kane is bad as a 30-year-old. Like, at that point, you haven't seen Citizen Kane. Like, just because you watched it once when your brain wasn't done cooking, that doesn't mean you've seen it. You haven't seen it. Part of the reason why I rewatch movies is because my opinions on them are constantly changing. And most of my favorite movies are movies that I did not like the first time I watched them. The Nice Guys, I actually did not like. I actually did not like The Nice Guys the first time I watched it. I thought it was fine. I thought it was funny. By the time it got to the end, I was like, oh, this is pretty good. This is all right. This is fun. But I wasn't super excited about it. I wasn't like hyped about it. And then, you know, so, like a year or two later, I got the urge to watch it again. And then I did. And I loved it because it's a really tightly integrated script that it's one of those sort of like Knives Out. If you've ever seen my Knives Out video, it's a script where all of the information is there, and it's shocking how much every line of dialogue sort of falls into place in the scheme of the universe of that film. It rewards rewatches. But so I always try to keep an open mind. And especially when you see something like the week that it comes out in the theaters and everybody's coming up with their hot takes and the pressure is on you to decide, is this good? Is this bad? That's the worst possible conditions for you to form and like an actual substantively interesting or worthwhile opinion on any kind of media whatsoever. Also true with like ongoing serialized narratives. You know, if you read a comic or watched a show as it was airing or as it was updating, and then you experienced the ending of that and you were like, this sucks. And then you're still saying it sucks, 10, 15 years later. And you were a teenager when you watched those things. Chances are you should probably go back and give them another shot. What else have I got here? I'm actually sort of out of these. I got the only other one of these down here that I haven't watched yet is Cabaret. Which is, I'm sure, shocking to a lot of people. This is another one of my great shames. I adore Bob Fosse. All That Jazz is one of my favorite movies.
God made the entire world in 6 days. He didn't go on overtime once. You can't even cut an hour-and-a-half movie in 7 months on triple time.
Josh, I made a few changes in the monologue. I think you'll like it.
Oh, my God. It is better. God.
Wait a minute.
I really respect that director, and I know I'm going to enjoy it and get a lot out of it. But I want it to be at the right time. I want it to be in the right moment, And the fact is that moment is never really gonna come, and it's really just like the moment is whenever you sit down and decide to watch it, and you'll spend the first 5 minutes going, maybe I should save this for another day. And then once that 5 minutes is up, you're going to be having a blast and you're going to sit and watch the whole movie. And then when the movie's over, you're going to have watched a movie. And then your brain will be full of all that information and you'll be a better person for it, probably. I have other movies over here. I have a bunch of David Lynch. I have all of David Lynch's movies up on a shelf over here above my TV. But there's one David Lynch movie I haven't seen, which is Inland Empire. I am saving it for a rainy day. The reason why I'm saving it, I have the original DVD. I'll just grab it. I have the original DVD release here that Lynch put out on his own dime. It's the only Lynch that I haven't watched. It's probably a terrible one to save to be the last David Lynch that you haven't seen. It seems like the most obscurantist Lynch film of them all, but that's how it is. In the TV show Lost, there's a character named Desmond.
Brother.
Well, all women are a little bit crazy, brother.
Who really likes Charles Dickens books, but there's one book that he hasn't read that he carries with him everywhere. And he says, like, I've read every book that Charles Dickens ever wrote except for this one because I want it to be the last book I read before I die. And that particular affect just always stuck with me. This is my one David Lynch film that I'm gonna save. It's not gonna be the last movie I watch before I die because I don't want to make that gamble. But this is one of the few movies that I'm like, I want to save this for a good moment. And I'm sure when I do that, I'm gonna be like, this is gonna be the one where I'm like, I saved something to be all poetic and stuff with. And then I watch it, I'm like, this movie is like really weird. I don't know if it's my thing. Then there's other stuff. I have a bunch of like box sets of directors that's sort of basically the same situation here, where it's like, well, of course I haven't watched all 500 Ingmar Bergman films. I'll get around to it eventually, ? Do I want to watch every single movie that Ingmar Bergman made? Shinya Tsukamoto. The guy who did Tetsuo the Iron Man. Do I really want to watch all these movies? Yes, I do. It's only 8 movies. That's not too many. With a lot of these, it's like, well, I like Tetsuo the Iron Man. Here's a bunch of his other movies. Yeah, I'll give those a shot. Why not? And I should say, the only way to go about like collecting movies and stuff like this is to wait until they do sales. Like Criterion twice a year does their 50% off flash sale, where for 24 hours their whole catalog is 50% off. Only time I ever buy Criterions. Never pay full price for these things. Arrow is another imprint like Criterion that does a bit more perverted movies. Although at this point, Criterion has sort of reached down into some of Arrow's territory, and Arrow has reached up into some of Criterion's territory. So at this point, I kind of just think of Arrow as Criterion of the UK. So in conclusion, it's a good idea to watch movies you haven't seen, and sometimes watching movies you haven't seen requires you to have physical discs of the movies that you haven't seen, so that someday you can sit down and go, I want to watch a movie I haven't seen. Let me go to my shelf full of movies that I haven't seen and pick out a movie I haven't seen so I can watch it, and then it'll become a movie that I have seen. And then you'll have watched it, and that'll be a movie that you've watched, and then somebody brings it up, and you go, I've watched that movie. Look at me. I'm cultured. And then you feel superior, and what else do you need? That's being into movies 101. No, you don't feel superior. I never feel superior to anybody for having watched movies. I always feel like a dunce because somebody's talking about a movie, and I'm like, I have knowledge of this other thing that's from a different universe to that movie, and everybody looks at me like I'm an alien. If you think being a movie buff is like a cool kids club, I got some bad news for you. Just watch more movies. Watch movies that challenge you, that you think that you might not be into, that you think are probably cringe, that you know by reputation, especially movies that you think in your head are like representative of a certain type of person that you hate. If you're the kind of person, I had to stop myself saying meaner words. If you're the kind of person who's like, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, all they made is bro movies. Those are just film guy, toxic masculinity, violence movies for men, and there's nothing for me there, and I'm sick of it. I want to watch something else. Come on now. Don't do that. Don't do that to yourself. Watch the movies. Watch the movies for yourself. And don't just watch The Godfather. Don't just watch Goodfellas. watch some other ones. Watch some other ones. See if that's actually the case. See if that's really true. Don't just follow along with what your friends are saying. Just give them a shot. Just give them a shot. See for yourself. Make up your own mind. Well, that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. If you liked whatever this was, then let me know in the comments. If you didn't like it, also let me know. I am trying to make an effort to do a bunch more scripted videos, and it's useful to also punctuate them with little things like this that are easy to set up that I can just ramble off about. And if you want to see more things like this in between my scripted videos, let me know, and I'll come up with more things that I can ramble about. This channel's called Let's Talk About Stuff. I can talk about anything. I'll talk about anything. Try and stop me. See what happens. Did you know that if you give me $10 a month at patreon.com/LTAS or camaraderie.co/SarahZedig, I'll read your name aloud in the credits of these videos? These people do: Draken Lupin, TB Skyen, Patrick Feeney, Emma Sylvia, Bobby Jane DeForge, Alex, Dare, JB Silbinary Wolf, Z, Sophie Wieberts, Halsey, Pinball Witch, Cam Chacon, Azriel Suzy Miniike, Aura Barista, J Mac D, Athiet, Bellicose, Quirk, Richard Dunbeck, Dick Beninia, Sophia, Catherine Jibes, Bingus, Jordan Pye, Rubeline, Scott Olson, Prum, Jay Jorts, Chthonic Syzyges, Kate Shrike, Vriskazone, The Girls, Now I Only Want to Triumph, Dyke Doll, and the internet's beloved Princess Grace. Whatever the case may be, one thing is clear. Movies exist.